A riddle wrapped in a conundrum, consumed in a dilemma, the Jeffrey Epstein files. Dominic Green, our friend from across the pond, wrote about it recently. I thought this was a particularly well-turned phrase or two. Sing, muse of Jeffrey Epstein, the man of many twists and turns who wandered full many ways until his odyssey came to an end in a cell in the Metropolitan Correctional Center in New York, where, despite being the most famous suspect in the land, no one was watching as he did or did not kill himself. Epstein's life and crimes are an American epic, Homeric in scale, appetite, and immorality. The 3.5 million pages of material in the Justice Department's information dump of January 30th would, if printed, amount to about 1,000 copies of War and Peace, or around 5,000 copies of Homer's Iliad and Odyssey in a single edition, with not exactly the same literary value, I may add. But the thing that we, and as I've mentioned many times as we've discussed this, that we can't do, which is the source of so much frustration, perhaps leading even into criminal acts, as this young man who tried to access the president's private residence in Mar-a-Lago, I mentioned at the outset of the show, with a shotgun and a can of gasoline, before confronted and killed by Secret Service when he raised a shotgun in defiance of them. Maybe partly inspired, this early reporting, maybe partly inspired by an obsession with the Epstein files. I don't know. That's what's one factoid that's been alleged. But we still can't get our arms around this, and that's the level of frustration. We still don't have a unified theory of what happened on so many fronts here and who the responsible parties are. Was he Mossad? Was he CIA? Was he a Russian asset? Was he all of the above? Was he none of the above? They just had parties, and any girls that were trafficked solely for the pleasure of Jeffrey and Ghislaine and no one else. His source of money was a couple of billionaires named Wexner and Black, or it wasn't. He has compromising information on all sorts of elites across the globe, or he doesn't. The basis for the estate to make the couple of hundred settlements worth tens of millions of dollars that were made with those who alleged that they were violated. But then there are some accusers who certainly have credibility questions. Accusations made in the direction of specific people, including quote-unquote Prince Andy, who is now actually facing a criminal prosecution. But that's it. After all that's said and done, we have millions of documents, but we still can't get a unified theory from the previous administration, from this administration, from those who follow this, in terms of what did and didn't happen, what can and can't be done to hold those responsible, to hold those who participated in illegal activity responsible under the law. Do we have evidence problems? Do we have witness problems? Do we have statute of limitation problems? Do we have all of the above? All of these documents and all of these lawyers that pored over said documents and materials for hundreds of hours, and nobody can put together a cogent 10 or 15-page report that sums this up so people can try to wrap their minds around what did or didn't happen and at whose hands, all of them. That seems to me, that's my frustration. I don't know if that's shared by others or that's a compelling explanation for why this is so unnerving to so many, in addition to, of course, the seriousness of the accusations. So let's get some help. Dominic Green is a columnist for the Washington Examiner, contributor to the Wall Street Journal, and fellow at the Royal Historical Society as well. Dominic, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Dan. Great to be here.
So you heard my frustration. Is that a frustration you can alleviate?
To a very small degree, I think. I share the frustration that you have. As a historian, I'm always looking for evidence and then working back from that to assemble a coherent picture of motivations and events and so on. And what we have here is very partial. I would add this, this is a trove of information. Most of it does not go back before the late 1990s because emails are such a big part of it. What Epstein was doing before he got an email account is completely obscure to us in this. And I believe, from my own inquiries, and I think that will shed some light on what he's doing in the period that we now have this information on. And all this stuff has been dumped in one huge pile. I think it's an act of trust in the American people that they can not go completely crazy with it and make things up. But it's also an act of desperation in that there's no quality control and it'll take years to sift it all through. But what I believe from my very preliminary investigations, and it fits rather with what I've been finding out over the last few years when I've been asking people, as one does. Epstein was selling connections and access and information, and the people that we're seeing in these emails, they are the late 1990s Democratic-oriented elite. We're talking about the Clintons, the fundraising circle for the Clintons, cutting-edge academics involved in life science research in places like Harvard. In other words, what you're not seeing is you're not seeing much of Donald Trump, for instance. You're not seeing much of Republican figures. You're seeing Ehud Barak, a failed Israeli prime minister. You're not seeing much of Benjamin Netanyahu or Ariel Sharon, who are his successors as more successful Israeli prime ministers. So this is a particular snapshot of a particular, what I call a ruling class. This is how things were done in the late 1990s, and it seems like a very long time ago now.
Well, and you also have some retrenching going on by talking heads. I thought this was pretty entertaining. Whoopi Goldberg, before her name appeared on the Epstein list.
Bottom line is this. Release the damn files and release them now. Release everything.
If this does not implicate Donald Trump, why wouldn't you say release everything? They absolutely have to show us what they're all hiding. If there's nothing to hide, release it all.
But all of that information is out there. Why not just put it to rest and say, release the list?
Because, they should just say, listen, this is what it is.
Yeah, so that was a pre-release list of the man-hating shrews on The View, and this is after Whoopi's on it.
Do you want to offer your G2? Okay.
And it looks like they said no thanks.
Yes.
So in other words, anybody can be on this list.
Well, this is my point, because I'm telling you, when I tell you people are trying to turn me into, I wasn't his girlfriend. You used to have facts before you said stuff.
But Trump is on the list.
Then they were interested in facts, and I think she was dating Ted Danson at the time, so she's got an alibi. But that's the whole attitude about all of this stuff, which it just makes it that much murkier.
Yeah, and a lot of the time, the emails show people seeking free stuff and accepting free stuff. People who think they deserve free stuff, whether they're academics or they're on TV or they're just famous for something. They want to be recognized and they think that entitles them. And as I was saying, this is the class of the late 1990s, and they did feel entitled to it. And it's almost hard now, nearly 30 years later, to remember that mood of we won. We won and we're entitled to sweep the board. That mood, in a way, the backlash against it is in part what produced MAGA and the 2016 elections and the huge change that has happened in public life since then. But as to this question of who was Epstein working for, where did it all come from? One of the things this is the most you can say on it, is put it this way. The United States has the most powerful intelligence apparatus of any country in the world. It will be very, very remiss of its agencies not to have noticed this guy emailing with Russians using Microsoft Outlook, which is not exactly the most secure way of doing it, not to have noticed any of this. And to therefore have put tabs on him or have him reporting back to them. And I think there is a substantial element of misdirection going on, as you say, in the way that people are denying certain things, but also in our focus on Epstein as a sex criminal. And I'm not minimizing the horrors of this at all. I'm saying that the most salacious aspect it might not actually be, historically, politically, the most interesting one. And when it comes to this question of transparency, we demand it. We're entitled to have it in law. And yet, somehow you never quite find out, because national security and the national interest remains good grounds for withholding material. So my supposition, therefore, is we're not ever going to get the smoking gun document, which says, I, Jeffrey Epstein, am working for X, Y, and Z. But if you were to ask me to go to a betting parlor, here in London and put something on it, I'd put money on Epstein primarily being employed by intelligence agencies of the United States. And as for how he made the money, some of that has come out in Britain, funnily enough, because of this Peter Mandelson, who was the big fixer for Tony Blair's Labour Party and also had a key influence in bringing Keir Starmer to the leadership of the Labour Party. The Mandelson emails show that Mandelson, when he was in the British government, leaking classified government correspondence to Epstein, so that Epstein would have been able, therefore, to make investments that would have made him look like some kind of financial genius to the people who were giving him their money to invest. So he may have made quite a lot of money like that.
But, I mean, I still don't really have a clear picture of how he got so close to Wexner and how he allegedly had power of attorney for Les Wexner for real estate transactions for a period of time when Wexner was clearly of sound mind and body. I mean, those are the sort of, and the Leon Black relationship and the things that Leon, so maybe some of this is misdirection. Tom Pritzker, maybe some of those emails that are released and we're focused on, maybe that's misdirection, as you say. But there's a lot of powerful people. There's a lot of billionaires that he was close to, and they know or they should know what he's up to, and yet he has this access to them and in some cases to vast resources that they otherwise control.
Yeah, I mean, you'd think that they would be on the lookout for that kind of chancer who would be promising to take care of things for them, or promising to make, returns on investments above the market average. I mean, those are the red light type things that would always flash in anyone's mind. This aspect of Epstein's life may well have been very similar, say, to Bernie Madoff. It may just have been the classic, Ponzi scamming. A charmer. I mean, how people found him charming is a bit baffling, but obviously some people did. Flattering people and playing them. This is clearly a very complicated person with several different compartments going on in his professional and social lives.
You think maybe like a cursory background check that you find him a convicted sex offender that may raise a flag. Maybe we don't better be associated with that.
Well, that's what I mean about, you would assume that the very powerful and very careful intelligence agencies would have been aware of that and would have been aware that a convicted sex offender after his release in 2009 continued socializing and working with very significant people all over the world, continued flying in and out of Russia as relations between the U.S. and Russia deteriorated. It is a matter of record that he was arrested during the first Trump administration and that the papers were released in the second. Now, whether you take that as part of Donald Trump's campaign against the Clintons and the 90s Democratic establishment, maybe that is a big motive in it, but it's a fact that nobody of the 90s Democratic establishment was much interested in prosecuting this or turning it up at all at the time. And for what it's worth, I don't believe Epstein did kill himself. And I've never met anyone who does, by the way. So, and I've asked lots of people who are interested, who follow this and have knew him, you investigate these things. Nobody believes that. So I think we should keep demanding answers and keep demanding the material, and gradually then perhaps we'll get a clearer picture. And I think the answer will be both more surprising in some regards and actually less surprising, very prosaic and dull in other regards. In other words, there's something quite ordinary and mediocre about this man. It's visible in the emails, as well as this extraordinary fantasy life and this great energy he put into tricking people. A big wheel.
So what was it that finally caused authorities in Britain to move on Prince Andrew?
Well, the release of these papers. I mean, there's been a drip of stories about Prince Andrew ever since late 2010, when after Epstein's release from prison in Florida, Andrew went to stay with him in New York. And then by degrees, every time there was a new piece of information released, Andrew was forced to step back by degrees in public life until eventually he's been reduced from the Duke of York and Prince to being just Mr. Mountbatten Windsor. So he didn't want to leave public life. He was literally pushed aside by his own family because they could see he was going to sink the ship. And nothing would have happened about this in Britain if it hadn't been for the release of the papers. Nothing would have happened also about Peter Mandelson, who is now being investigated by the police here, if it hadn't been for the release of the papers in the U.S. Mandelson and Prince Andrew, as he used to be, they are collateral damage to this. They're distant figures in the same way as Ehud Barak's reputation has taken a further dent in Israel. These are marginal affairs. It's very interesting that inside the U.S. there doesn't seem to be the same attention paid to who was involved. And remember, this weird situation is that we are led to believe that Ghislaine Maxwell, who is in prison, who's also British, in prison for what is not entirely a victimless crime, but it is a crime without perps. But all of this procuring of young girls, who are the Johns? Who are the men?
Well, exactly.
Of this?
And
I mean,
well,
that's ridiculous.
Right. It was just Jeffrey Epstein and herself. Well, but I mean, if it seems to me this is where, it also doesn't make sense, except like this is this is mafia. And so she is not going to roll on people that she could roll on because to save herself or to reduce her sentence because then she's next up to get Epstein.
Look what happened to him. Died in what we say suspicious circumstances. Look what happened to her father, who was involved with some very interesting people in terms of intelligence work from the Cold War. Father went overboard from his yacht after defrauding his pension fund holders for the newspaper that he owned in Britain, the Mirror. So if I was her, I'd take the fifth as she did when she came up for parole, because the only alternative is she's going to have one of those mysterious accidents that seems to happen to people in that situation. So I think if it walks like a duck and it's quacking like one, then we can assume there is clearly no interest in prosecuting any of the men who took advantage of the services being offered by Maxwell and Epstein. And again, Peter Mandelson, who in American terms is an irrelevance. The guy was ambassador to Washington for a few months, and that was it. But Peter Mandelson, who's a big figure in Britain, is seen saying, he's feeling stressed out and he needs and then they make jokes about procuring young men for him. He says he needs a Cuban American or some of them Shanghai or something like that. There are allusions to his taste in men, which is Epstein seems to be pandering to. Now, there's no suggestion this was underage or, and so on, but it suggests that this was a routine occurrence. Mm. So are we to believe that only Peter Mandelson was taking advantage of what sounds to me like a flight roster that was very full of young women and probably young men as well? At the same moment in Britain, there is an investigation going on to the fact that women were being trafficked through the airports, the secondary, tertiary airports around London, where you didn't have to register who was on the plane if it was a private jet. And again, there's no suggestion that they were underage. They seem to have come from Russian agencies. But again, is that the actual story? That someone wasn't filling out the correct flight manifest? No, the actual story is what happened when they got there and what happened to them afterwards. Somebody should probably be looking into that. So there are more questions than answers, but from already what we're seeing fits a pattern. This is, an international aspect of sex trafficking combined with an international trading of information and so on. And where those two come together, you can expect actually to be blackmail to be involved as well. Yet there is no evidence yet of that, really. So,
Dominic Green, columnist for the Washington Examiner, contributor to the Wall Street Journal, and fellow of the Royal Historical Society. Dominic, thank you as always. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Dan.
And Dominic Green joined us on Chicago's Morning Answer.
It's like a hot, steaming cup of information to start your day. It's Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.
Oh!
If you're over 65 and struggling with knee pain, Joint Relief Institute offers a guaranteed way to treat it. It's non-surgical and often covered by Medicare and private insurance. It's JRI's Joint Arthritis Treatment, knee lubrication placement that's so accurate, it's